Hey there, folks! Tonight, we're diving into a topic that's about as fun as a root canal propaganda. But hold on, don't change that channel. This isn't some dusty history lesson. We're talking about the here and now, the information we consume every single day, and how it might be messing with our minds. Our guide on this delightful journey is none other than Noam Chomsky, the rock star linguist turned political activist. Back in 1989, he dropped a truth bomb called, "This book, my friends, is a real eye-opener. It argues that even in free societies, our thoughts are being subtly manipulated by the very media we trust." Chomsky's central thesis is as simple as it is unsettling. True democracy is threatened when citizens are fed a steady diet of propaganda disguised as news. This manufactured consent, as he calls it, keeps us docile, obedient, and blissfully unaware of the strings being pulled behind the curtain. But fear not, dear viewers, because tonight we're going to expose the tricks of the trade. We'll dissect Chomsky's arguments, explore how the media shapes our perceptions, and leave you with the tools you need to spot propaganda like a pro. So buckle up, because things are about to get real. Now, before you dismiss Chomsky as some tinfoil hat-wearing conspiracy theorist, let's be clear, he's not talking about some Orwellian dystopia where the government controls every word we read or hear. No, this is far more insidious. Chomsky argues that the media's own structure and incentives create a system where propaganda flourishes, often unconsciously. Enter the propaganda model, a concept Chomsky developed with Edward S. Herman. This model, laid out in their book, proposes that news isn't just what's reported, it's what gets filtered out, what gets emphasized, and what gets conveniently ignored. And guess what? These decisions aren't random. Think of it like a giant funnel. At the top, you have all the events happening in the world, but only a select few make it through the narrow opening, and what comes out the other end is often a distorted version of reality. So what are these magical filters that transform raw information into a palatable news smoothie? Well, Chomsky identifies 5 main culprits. 1, ownership. Who owns the media? Big corporations with their own agendas, that's who. These guys aren't exactly known for biting the hand that feeds them, so don't expect any hard-hitting exposés on corporate greed or environmental destruction from outlets owned by, well, greedy corporations. 2, advertising. Remember those annoying commercials that interrupt your favorite shows? They're not just there to sell you things, folks. They're the lifeblood of the media, and advertisers have a knack for influencing content. Don't expect to see any stories that might upset their bottom line or alienate potential customers. 3, sourcing. Where do journalists get their information? Often from official sources like government officials or corporate spokespeople. Now, these folks are usually more interested in spinning a narrative than telling the whole truth, so journalists who rely too heavily on them risk becoming unwitting mouthpieces for the powers that be. 4, Flack ever noticed how certain stories or perspectives get attacked relentlessly in the media? That's Flack, my friends, and it's designed to discredit dissenting voices and maintain the status quo. When journalists know they'll be bombarded with criticism for challenging powerful interests, they're less likely to rock the boat. 5, anti-communism/fear. This filter might seem a bit outdated, but Chomsky argues that it's been replaced by a more generalized fear-mongering that keeps the public in line. Whether it's terrorism, immigrants, or economic collapse, there's always a boogeyman lurking in the shadows, ready to justify increased surveillance, military spending, or whatever else those in power deem necessary. Now, let's get specific, shall we? Chomsky's book is chock full of examples where the media's coverage of an event was influenced by these filters. One particularly striking case is the US government's support for brutal dictatorships in Central America during the Cold War. While these regimes were busy massacring their own people, the American media, for the most part, looked the other way. Why? Well, these dictatorships, no matter how horrific, were seen as a bulwark against the spread of communism. And that, my friends, trumped any concerns about human rights or democracy. The result? The American public remained largely ignorant of the atrocities being committed in their name, and the US government was free to continue propping up repressive regimes with impunity. This, in a nutshell, is the power of the propaganda model in action. Section 5, the illusion of choice media ownership and concentration. You might think, well, that's just one example. Besides, I get my news from a variety of sources. And that's great, folks, it really is. But here's the thing, the illusion of choice can be just as effective as outright censorship. You see, the media landscape might seem vast and diverse, but the reality is that it's increasingly controlled by a handful of massive corporations. These media giants own everything from newspapers and magazines to television networks and movie studios. They have their fingers in every pie, and they're not afraid to use their influence to shape the narrative in their favor. The result? A chilling homogeneity of thought where dissenting voices are drowned out and the same pro-establishment messages are repeated ad nauseum across multiple platforms. It's like being trapped in an echo chamber, where the only ideas you encounter are those that have already been pre-approved by the powers that be. Section 6. Challenging the narrative, dissenting voices, and the marginalization of dissent. Now, it's not like there aren't people out there trying to challenge the dominant narrative. Journalists, activists, academics, and everyday citizens are constantly working to expose injustice, hold the powerful accountable, and offer alternative perspectives. But guess what? They often face an uphill battle against a system that's rigged against them. When dissenting voices are consistently marginalized, ignored, or ridiculed by the mainstream media, it creates a climate of self-censorship. People become afraid to speak out, to question authority, or to challenge the status quo for fear of being ostracized, ridiculed, or even punished. And that, my friends, is a recipe for disaster. Section 7. Criticisms and counter-arguments. Is Chomsky just too cynical? Now, to be fair, Chomsky's work hasn't been without its critics. Some accuse him of being overly cynical, of seeing conspiracies where none exist, and of underestimating the public's ability to think for themselves. Others argue that the internet and the rise of social media have fundamentally changed the media landscape, making it much harder for any one group to control the flow of information. And they're not entirely wrong. The internet has undoubtedly democratized access to information, giving a voice to the voiceless and providing a platform for alternative perspectives to flourish. But let's not kid ourselves, folks. The same forces that shape the mainstream media are alive and well online. From algorithmic manipulation to the spread of fake news, the internet has created a whole new set of challenges to navigate. So while it's important to acknowledge the limitations of Chomsky's analysis, it would be foolish to dismiss his warnings entirely. Section 8. The internet age, new media, same illusions? Here's the thing, the internet, for all its promise, hasn't magically solved the problem of propaganda. In some ways, it's made it worse. The sheer volume of information online can be overwhelming, making it difficult to separate fact from fiction. And the echo chamber effect is alive and well on social media, where we're constantly bombarded with content that confirms our existing biases. And let's not forget about the rise of state-sponsored propaganda and disinformation campaigns which have weaponized social media to sow discord, manipulate public opinion, and interfere in elections around the world. So yeah, the internet has changed the game, but the underlying dynamics of power and information control remain eerily familiar. The good news is that the internet has also given us the tools to fight back. We have access to more information than ever before, and we have a responsibility to use it wisely. By being critical consumers of information, by seeking out diverse perspectives, and by supporting independent media, we can help create a more informed and engaged public. Section 9. Conclusion. Breaking free from the echo chamber. So, what have we learned tonight, folks? Chomsky's is a sobering reminder that even in democracies, thought control is a very real threat. The media, for all its flaws, plays a vital role in shaping our understanding of the world, but it's up to us, the public, to be critical consumers of information, to question the narratives we're being sold, and to seek out alternative perspectives. Don't fall for the illusion of freedom, folks. Get out there, read widely, challenge your assumptions, and never ever stop thinking for yourselves. Because in the words of the great Noam Chomsky himself, the smart way to keep people passive and obedient is to strictly limit the spectrum of acceptable opinion, but allow very lively debate within that spectrum. That's our show for tonight, folks. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time on